everyone.
Good morning.
Good to see such a great turnout today. Our speaker this morning is Floyd Heater, who is the Vice President for Valley Health Southern Region Hospitals, and then basically that's the hospitals here in Front Royal, in Luray, and in Woodstock. And he's, more specifically for today's program, he's President of Warren Memorial Hospital. He's responsible for the overall management of our Southern Region's operations and achievement of our strategic initiatives for those hospitals. He joined Shenandoah Memorial Hospital as its president in 1996 and has been a key leader in Valley Health since Shenandoah Memorial joined the system in 2003. He's a fellow of the American College of Healthcare Executives, a member of the Medical Group Management Association, and currently a member of the HOSPAC Board of Directors, which is part of the Virginia Hospital Healthcare Association. Serves on boards of numerous civic organizations throughout the Valley and is also a member of the Front Royal Rotary Club. With that, I will introduce Floyd Heater. Join me in welcoming him.
We have a tangle of wires.
We do have a tangle of wires. Sorry.
Negotiating that here. Just give me 1 second. There we go. All right. Okay, now everything's at full screen here.
Next slideshow. Sure. We got you.
Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Well, good morning, fellow Rotarians. Thank you very much for having me here with you this morning. As Melanie said, I've been with Valley Health. It'll be 22 years this summer. I spent most of my time at Shenandoah Memorial Hospital. Came there in '96, and I came here right after my good friend Pat Nolan left in late 2015. Pat and I worked together a number of years, so I'm very familiar with Warren Memorial Hospital. He and I actually, a few years ago, kind of pitched the concept of organizing ourselves as a Southern Region group of hospitals to Mark Merrill, who's the system CEO, and he approved that, and it's been great because our hospitals are similar in size. Page is the smallest, but our programming in our hospitals are very similar. Our patients' needs are very similar, so it just made a lot of sense at that juncture to look at ourselves as a Southern Region. So I want to give you a little information on the new hospital. A lot of excitement. In December, the Valley Health System Board of Trustees approved a new $100 million investment into Warren County, which we hope to get started on this summer. I'll walk you through the timeline. I want to spend a little bit of time talking about our history and some of the work that we've been doing the last 2 years, even before we start talking about bricks and mortar and making a brand new splash and a new hospital and a new presentation to our whole community. I want to talk about why program development and physician recruitment and the like is so important. And I think you'll probably agree with that. So a little history on Warren Memorial. Some of you probably know this, but perhaps not all of you do. In 1951, Warren Memorial opened up. In '68, we opened Limb Care, which was at that time 40 beds. '79, we expanded the South Wing, added 40 additional beds. In '93, Warren Memorial and Winchester Medical Center formed what was originally Winchester Regional Health Systems, became Valley Health System. So they were the first two hospitals to form Valley Health. Shenandoah came online in 2002. Our two West Virginia hospitals and Page Memorial in the late 2000s. In '97, we expanded women's care in the emergency department. And if you've been in the emergency department recently, you'll know why we're proposing to go from 12 treatment areas to 18, virtually doubling the size of the emergency department. It's truly, it's amazing to me that we see about 25,000 patients a year in that relatively small emergency department. So that's going to be a welcome new addition. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Then we opened up Limb Care, brand new. It is the go-to place. If you've never been in there to visit anyone, It is a gem. It is a crown jewel for long-term care facilities in our region. Everybody who gets discharged from the hospital or needs rehab wants to go to Lynn Care. It has a waiting list, always has a waiting list. It's really a wonderful long-term care facility, and we're very proud of it. In 2008, we opened up the Commerce Street building where all our outpatient services, a good many of them are, particularly we have a large rehab component there, OBGYN offices, orthopedics, and Front Royal Internal Medicine. And looking forward to breaking ground this summer, and 2 years from now, probably in the fall time, open up a new hospital off Leech Run Parkway. Which is a beautiful new road. Most of you, I assume, have driven up and down Leech Run Parkway at some time in the last year or so. It's just a fantastic new road. And we're going to be, our parcel, and I'll show you here in a second, is going to be located just literally next door to where the new middle school opened up here this year. We've made a lot of investments into the communities we serve. We serve about 18 counties when you add it all up between here and West Virginia and even up into Maryland. But just over the last 10 years, we've built 2 new hospitals in West Virginia, opened up a diagnostic and wellness center in Winchester, Shenandoah Surgery Center, opened at SMH. That was a few years ago when I was there. And moving on down, we opened up medical office buildings in West Virginia, opened up a diagnostic center at Shenandoah. And what we chose to do at Shenandoah was just essentially replace that hospital over time, as opposed to Warren, kind of a big bang, one splash. Shenandoah's physical plant was in relatively decent shape and allowed us to really get it to the point where it's at today, a really fine facility in Shenandoah County. So it's pretty much up to snuff right now. In 2015 to 17, I mentioned that we have a new cancer center open in Winchester. It's a beautiful facility. Really expanding our cancer program and availability and access to patients throughout the region. We're very proud of that. The Valiant Health Surgery Center opening, and then most recently a medical office building in North Towerville at Winchester Medical Center. And believe it or not, especially during this flu season, Winchester Medical Center actually has a shortage of beds at times. So we'll probably be looking to expand there at some time in the future. And the new hospital, medical office building in Front Royal is being planned, and that's what we're going to get into right now. And so that's a little bit about, that's just in the last 10 years. So Valley Health has been, I would say, their capital budget, a pretty high capital budget, and even with that though, all their finances are very strong. We really covet our high bond ratings, and so even though we've expanded and taken on quite a bit of debt over the years, we enjoy a healthy financial rating by Standard & Poor's and Moody's. A little bit about population growth, and this is important because it has lots of implications for how people use healthcare services and why we invest in the services that we do to support the population. We're trying to look 10, 20 years out and say what is the utilization of services, how is our population aging, which it most definitely is. If you look at the age birth to 17, it's actually, and I would say one caveat on all these population projections, if you're working for the Census Bureau, they're usually pretty right. I will say, I would say they're probably, in my view, they're not aware of all the microeconomic activity that's occurring in every community, so they could be off a little bit. Generally, they're very accurate, and I do think, though, that Front Royal is, and Warren County in general, is going to change a lot like what we've seen east of us. And so some of these projections may be off a little bit, but we have to use them to plan our services going forward. Now, if you look at 18 to 44, that's projected to increase about 6.5% over the next 10 years. Modest growth, I would say. Here's the one that catches everyone's eye. If you look at the 45 to 64 band, that's where I am, probably many of us are. Modest growth there as well. But take a look to the right, age 65 plus. about a 45% increase in our population in the over 65 age cohort. So people of that age have lots of chronic conditions, have unique health needs, and they're living much longer than they were even 10, 20, 30 years ago, most certainly. So you're looking at folks who are maybe 60 years old now, living to be 90, and that has lots of implications for the kind of medical care that we need to plan for our community. I mentioned new services. This is very important, and it's my belief that Warren Memorial has had a challenge, and I think when we did a feasibility study before we developed our business case for the new hospital, and talking with members of the community, one of the things they stressed, and I agreed, was that we needed to provide more compelling reasons for people to stay locally for their care. That, in other words, we needed more choice of providers and more services that would want them in a new hospital, really. The optics aren't good, the parking is poor, the access to care on our current site, I think most would agree, is just not ideal. It was built in 1951 primarily, and it was focused on inpatient care at the time. So we're now at a point where 75 to 80% of the patients that come to Warren are outpatient. Same-day surgery, just outpatient testing, imaging, rehab. So that changes the way you configure your medical campus for the future. One of the things we put a certificate of need in for a couple years ago and just opened up and actually did our first case on March 5th. Actually have a couple scheduled today. We opened up a cardiac cath lab. Dr. Neil Gaither, I don't know if you can, he's this gentleman right here, been with Winchester Cardiology for a long time. He's kind of been our spiritual leader, if you will. He's really been the champion to advance heart and vascular care in the southern region, particularly in Warren County. Deserves a lot of credit, and he has really done a wonderful job. So essentially what we've got here, if you can imagine, is really the same quality, the same protocols, the same cardiologists, the same vascular surgeons, same nursing staff, basically setting up a satellite cardiac cath laboratory in Warren County to make that service more accessible for our local citizens. They don't have to travel out of the area for that life-saving care. And a lot of you have heard about door-to-balloon time, how important it is from the time to get that vessel opened up. If you can get there in 10 minutes versus 40 minutes for the transport, that can mean saving lives. We have this year expanded our hours on weekdays and weekends. We have a high percentage of the population that commutes out every day, and if you close up your laboratory at 5, it doesn't make it very accessible to your local population. So we've really worked hard to open up access, even now, even before we move into a hospital, for our community. So they can come in on Saturday mornings, have a mammogram done if it's not convenient, at any other time during the week, those kinds of things. We opened up quick care, and that's been really very successful. So now we have urgent care in the Riverton Commons area, and then quick care on the south side of town. And that was really at the behest of a lot of local citizens that wanted access to convenient care on the south side of Front Royal. So access to existing services and opening that up so our community wants to use the hospital is a very important theme here to keep in mind. I mentioned our cardiology team. As of now, it's Dr. Gaither is here, and Dr. Jen Anderson just recently joined us about a month ago. He used to work for Winchester Cardiology, went to West Virginia for a while, and now we've got him back, I think for good. Jim's a really good guy. Dr. Hobel, I think some of you may have family that receive services from Dr. Hobel. She's in the urgent care building here in Riverton Commons. Dr. Lou Kitchen is a gastroenterologist who's coming to the community each week. He and Dr. Grace Shee split time and come to Front Royal to provide office care, office clinic, as well as endoscopy procedures. Dr. John English is someone we worked really hard to recruit this year. John has an interesting history. He's actually met his wife here at Christendom College and did his program work at University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. And he is just fresh out of residency and offers us a whole new menu, if you will, and new techniques in general surgery. He joins Dr. Bob Melvitt and Barb Walter in practice here in Front Royal. So we're really pleased to have John here and his family. Dr. Eric Mitchell is a fellowship-trained sports medicine surgeon out of the University of Massachusetts. I don't know how well you can see that picture, but he is a big guy, and he lights up a room. He has a large personality. His patients love him. He's off to a fantastic start, and we really believe there's a high percentage of patients that heretofore may have been going elsewhere for their sports medicine injuries and other just general orthopedics. He doesn't just do sports medicine, but that is where he's fellowship trained. And Dr. Tim Gajewski came to us from Atlanta. He actually joined us in December, and Tim is formerly worked at Cleveland Clinic for about 8 years. So he has a pretty significant resume. He spent practice in Ohio for probably 15 or 16 years. He's a total joint and reconstructive orthopedic surgeon. So he really is where he specializes is in total joints, total knees, and total hips, particularly. And if you remember what I said about our population and how it's changing over the next few years, you see why these two guys are really important. Dr. Borkan and Dr. Kinman-Lola, I dare you to say that 3 times fast. Dr. Kinman-Lola started our vascular clinic here about 2 years ago, and he is most recently joined this summer by Dr. Matt Borkan, who came to us from Vanderbilt University. And so we have some really super trained vascular surgeons. Actually, Dr. Borkan has a couple cases, I think, scheduled this Friday in our new cath lab. They use the cath lab as well, in addition to the cardiologists. So as I mentioned, the Board of Trustees approved a new hospital at a cost of, when you add financing costs in there, it's about a little over $100 million. And there's a little before and after picture of the new facility. We've got some more pictures towards the end that I want to show you. So what are we trying to do? The benefits for the community. Create a contemporary facility designed for the future. We want to make this a little different than what you might typically, when you drive up to a medical campus. We want it to have an inviting, healthy look. We're going to try to save as many trees as possible. We want to make it a welcoming environment where we have walking trails and just really promote health and wellness. And I will say that the campus, I'll show you a picture here in a second, lends itself to future development. The parcel that the hospital is going to go on is about 28, 29 acres. But around it are plenty of room for development for the community. I know I get asked a lot about a wellness center and things like that. I do think there's great potential to make this a real health destination, not just a hospital or a medical office building, but a real true health destination for our citizens. It's been a real help. Just the word that we're going to be building a new hospital has really generated a lot of interest, much more interest in physicians wanting to come practice here in the community, attracting nurses, any healthcare professional. They really want to sign on to something new and exciting like a new hospital. So I'm already beginning to see the higher level of interest in recruiting professionals to come here. We do have competition, right? So it can't stay in place. The current situation we have is not competitive. It does not offer enough choice to our community, and that's why we've got to make the investment in our future. We have an outdated facility. I think, as I mentioned earlier, the optics are not great. We've tried to keep it up cosmetically, aesthetically, but it is an old building, and it is what it is. And so, to you, that may be speaking to the choir, but it's obvious that we need to get off that site and onto a more accessible site. And really give, I think the most important one is that last one, is to give people strong options to want to stay in their local community to receive their care. And that's what we're really focused on. So here's a few numbers. 177,000 square feet. Now that includes the hospital proper and an adjacent medical office building, 3-floor medical office building. 36 all private rooms. Right now, we are one of the few hospitals I know of that still has semi-private rooms, and that's a real dissatisfier for people, as you can imagine. This day and age, years ago, that was very common. It was not unusual. So we're planning to put 36 all private rooms, much larger than what they currently are. The emergency department is going to go from 12 treatment areas to 18, and we are going to shell space in for an additional 4 rooms so we can plan for growth, up to 22 treatment areas. Kind of a corollary to that is we will have our own helipad that doesn't sit in the middle of a parking lot. Have you ever been there as a patient when a helicopter comes in? It happens a few times a week. It seems to me it does anyway. Maybe not quite that often, but I hear the buzzing and the loudspeakers go off, and we won't have to contend with that anymore. But it will be, the EMS folks love that, I can tell you. And then there will be a 6-bed observation unit to allow us to house patients who the doctors are uncertain whether they need to be admitted or not. So it gives us a way to keep them in a really tightly monitored setting, but until we make that judgment about whether they meet admission criteria. 3 operating rooms, I should say, additionally 2 procedure rooms, primarily for endoscopy. So 3 operating rooms, 2 procedure rooms, cardiac cath lab. Like I said, it sits on about 28 acres and about $98 million cost. So I want to talk about this because not having a slide here to address labor and delivery and obstetrics, you might have noticed there's been a bit of news. I stopped reading Facebook long ago. But I want to talk about this for a second. Actually been having several community meetings lately with groups to just kind of discuss this issue. Here's some of the numbers that are driving it. You saw the population projections into the future. Tried to look at, when we set up services, we're going to invest $100 million in services. Where do we need to put that investment to serve the community the best? We look at it, we have about less than a baby born a day at Warren Memorial. It's a 24/7 service, so you're talking about 350 or so deliveries a year, and it's stayed relatively the same. Now, one thing a lot of people don't know is that more than half, actually it's about 60% of the women in Warren County choose not to deliver at Warren Memorial Hospital. They either go to Winchester Medical Center or some other provider. Or home birth is also a fairly popular option, particularly in our area. As I mentioned earlier, the real age cohort that's exploding over the next 10 to 15 to 20 years is the over 65 population. It wasn't something that we decided overnight. We really did take a careful look at it, looked at what our current utilization is, what our projected utilization would be, talked with industry consultants about how many deliveries do you really need to have for a community hospital to have a viable obstetrics program, and most importantly, even as we are here today, it takes about, in any community, to recruit obstetricians to your community. They will not want to join your program for less than a 1 in 3 call situation. Very few, you cannot recruit physicians to join anything less than a 3-person practice, basically. And even today, we have 2 full-time, or actually 3 full-time doctors. One of those is a locum tenens physician. Actually, is not a permanent member of our medical staff. So we've been kind of holding it together with 3 really good obstetricians. But when I look into the future and who we're all competing for really a small number of available practitioners throughout the country. My worry is that the ability to staff that on a long-term basis is going to be very challenging. It's been challenging for the last 20 years, and I don't see that changing all that much. So at Warren, One of the other misconceptions out there, though, is that there will be prenatal and postpartum care in Front Royal and Luray and Woodstock, for that matter. So the doctors at Shenandoah Valley OBGYN, Front Royal Family Practice, will continue to see their patients throughout the whole 9 months of their prenatal experience, and then work in coordination with the hospitalist group. At Winchester Medical Center, we have OBGYN hospitalists who do nothing actually but deliver babies. And so they will be working closely, taking care of their patients all the way up through the point of delivery, and then they'll deliver their baby at Winchester Medical Center and then come back and receive their care in the local community. They are not going anywhere. They are staying here. In fact, they're looking at ways to really expand services in their offices for their patients. At the medical center, we have emergency department just dedicated to OB patients. I don't know if a lot of you knew that or not. But we have labor delivery and recovery rooms, lactation consultants on staff, a 30-bed all-private neonatal intensive care unit. And that's important. A lot of our babies being born these days are higher risk pregnancies that we would actually prefer to see them have close accessibility to a neonatal intensive care unit. And maternal fetal medicine specialists as well for high risk moms. So here's the timeline, as I mentioned earlier. We hope to break ground. I'm anticipating right now, sometime in the August, September timeframe. Our certificate of need is still in the state and with the state. They should render a decision by June. We're already working on all the detailed design and planning with our physician leaders and our department managers, so that once we receive that state approval to go ahead, we'll be able to break ground here in August, September. And hopefully cut that ribbon in the fall of 2020. So I don't know how well you can see this, but probably not too well, but I'll try to orient you here. And then we'll drill down on this. This is Leech Run Parkway. This is running from north to south. And it's a rather large parcel. It's about 150 acres. I don't know if you were aware that it was that big. I keep saying we could build a ski slope up here somewhere, but it's really steep, and maybe someday. I guess I would play into fitness, all right. Orthopedics as well, too. That's as a conservation area where the dark green is, you'll see a lot of, these are not earmarked for anything right now, but these parcels around the hospital campus do lend themselves well to other healthcare partnerships. And I do think that we will be looking for partners to join us in developing those surrounding parcels as we move forward in the next few years. So this is kind of a rendering. There's the helipad right there. This is a rendering looking south to north. So the school is up at the top of the screen, just north of the site. At the ground level will be the Poland or the emergency department, and access to the main part of the campus. You'll swing around, and I'll show you in a second. You come back in. Actually, will come in from the east side of the campus and enter in there. On the left is the hospital proper, and on the right is the medical office building. That's just another south to north look at it, just a little different angle. This would be as you're walking up the parking lot from the east side, just kind of, there's going to be kind of a major spine north to south that goes up right through the center of the campus. And we are, I can't promise you all those trees that are showing there what you say, but we're going to do our best, because we really do think that is, really an opportunity. It's a greenfield site, and it's a beautiful site. We want to try to preserve as much nature around the campus that we can. So, and And that's just looking at it coming from the south there up on Leech Run. You can see it sits up quite high, a little higher than you might expect. Don't get too caught up in the colors being used here. We're still fleshing a lot of what will the skin of the building look like, what kind of windows do we want to use, ribbon versus button, those kinds of things. But generally it will have a access point with the medical office building on the right. So whether you're coming to the office building or to visit someone in the hospital or have a test in the hospital, there'll be a central entranceway there to peel off to either building. This is looking at, remember I mentioned the emergency department, so you're looking at it as you're coming up the driveway, and you look to your left, the emergency department would be right straight ahead. We are going to be trying, you'll notice that this facility will have a lot more glass, a lot more lighting, be open. We're really trying to create an environment where there'll be some public areas for people to congregate. There won't just be kind of your typical small waiting room. We're trying to make it open and inviting so that people can have a cup of coffee while they're waiting for a family member who's getting a test. So a lot of there'll be kind of a central core there where we'll be very publicly open and inviting to come. And trying to take some of the stress out of healthcare, because I think anybody that has come to a hospital, or it can be a stressful, even for a simple test, it can be a stressful environment for people. So we're trying to bring that down with the kind of environment we're trying to create. Now, I know you can't see that well, but we won't get into detailed design here at this meeting, but I do want you to know kind of how the floors are planned to lay out. At the ground level, this would be on level 1, is your emergency department. And adjacent to the emergency department, you'll see where it says imaging. And that's really important. So we'll have almost physically within the emergency department, we're planning to locate the CT scanner. Now it'll be accessible, the adjacencies to it will be accessible for your general outpatient population. But emergency departments rely on CT scans so much these days. It's kind of today's equivalent of what used to be just a chest x-ray or a musculoskeletal exam. CTs are really a big part of what goes on in the emergency department. So that will be adjacent to the PD. And then we'll have the respiratory therapy department. And some of the support services you'll see that you might typically find in a hospital are actually going to be on the first floor of the medical office building. And the reason we're doing that is the cost of construction in the medical office building is lower. The requirements, the code requirements are different. It allows us to build it at a lower cost per square foot, but still have them very proximal to the main hospital, that being the laboratory, pharmacy, materials management, things like that. Level 2 is where we'll have essentially our surgical suite with our cath lab, our 3 ORs, and again, also imaging department, because that needs to be very close by with MRI and other imaging services in order to support the surgical department. You see, this doesn't look that big, but this is what I was talking about earlier. A lot of public space. We're really trying to make this an inviting area for the public to gather, and also to the right, we're still working on the details of this, but we want to create some kind of we will continue to have rehab services in our Commerce Street building, but we want to build kind of an annex, if you will, or a wellness, a small rehab sports medicine area to the right, so you'll have kind of an exercise area off to the right of the public area. And then your physician offices will start on the 2nd floor, and they'll also go up to the 3rd floor. So where it says clinic there is some of it to be determined. We still we'll have a blend of primary care and a lot of specialty care that we currently have in all different areas of our community right now. And the 3rd floor is the 36-bed unit. So, and then, of course, like I said, the clinic space on the 3rd level as well. So what we're trying to create there is essentially a one-stop shopping environment for our community. So if they have to come in and just see a physician, they can do that. They have to see a specialist, they can do that. Most everything, trying to gear it so that most everything a consumer might need at any given day that is accessible there on our campus. So we're also looking at the prospect of a retail pharmacy, and we haven't decided where to situate that. But probably near the medical hospital, because a lot of people obviously have prescription needs when they come away from a physician visit. So that's, how am I doing on time? Okay.
We can take questions.
Very good. Very good. I know that was a quick run through, but I think, how much time do we have? So I make sure I'm respectful of your time. Yes.